You're not responsible. It was wrong. Reach out to me. We'll connect you.
I will never see, speak, or hear from Erin Smith-Levin for the rest of my life.
I've been raised since the age of 4 to follow orders, do as I was told, or risk losing everything.
If we speak out, that's the only way they're going to get the strength to have the courage to do the same.
Why the hell does someone have to escape to get out of a religion?
I'm still shocked by the evil. This is pure evil at work.
Okay, welcome to Come Get Some Extra Scientology with Erin Pressley, Part 2, the author of the book Escaping Scientology, Wonderful Lady. Today I got a great second part with Erin Pressley. Next week you're going to hear from Claire Headley. I've tried for the better part of a year to get Claire on. Finally got her, and she was amazing. And she talked about some things that you don't really hear her talk about a lot, if at all. So it's very important that you catch Claire. And after Claire will be Sina Kamula. We've already recorded our interview. If you think you knew Sina was a sweet girl with a great heart and very strong presence about her, you don't know yet. You'll hear from her. She's amazing and has some great insight. And then Tara Riley. Tara Riley, we talked for 3 hours. So that's going to be split up into 3 parts for you guys. But she said you talked about a lot of things you didn't expect. We didn't expect to talk about. Between Sina and Tara, be forewarned. They're going into those interviews. Those are going to be heavy on the subject of suicide. And I'll be putting that suicide hotline back up there for those. And then I'm going to be wrapping it up with a wonderful conversation that I know we're going to have that we have been talking a long time about. Miriam Francis and I will have a discussion. Again, talking about some things you haven't heard about yet. Some amazing content that I'm very proud of. I'm proud of everything I've done on this show. And so in the meantime, let's go ahead and let's get right down to it. Here's part 2 of Erin Pressley.
Humiliation is a big piece of how Misacavige runs things, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Have you come to any sections like that in my book yet, where you were shocked by David Miscavige?
Your first reference to it, just a bunch of people not knowing what they're supposed to do, and you stepping up and saying, "Oh, I'll do it," not having any clue what he's looking for.
Oh yeah, exactly. That happens all the time. I think that David Miscavige. I hope I can express this well enough. I think I cover it really well in my book, but David Miscavige draws power from nullifying other people. He really conducts himself as if he's larger than life, and he used to walk around the in-face as such, dominating. There's a term in Scientology called domination by nullification. And what he does, he uses humiliation and invalidation to put people down and make them feel stupid and humiliated. And then they become susceptible to him. And as I talk about in my book, we would look at him and we would appreciate things like being able to go home on time, like at midnight, and being able to sleep at night, or being able to eat regular meals instead of beans and rice. In other words, he had it all set up so that, we were constantly in punishment or discipline mode. He would assign us wrong ethics conditions, and we would have to do all this various punishment and amends. And then when we were able to live a regular life, like eat regular meals and sleep in our beds at night, we would feel so grateful to him. And see, that was a very sick codependency that he set up.
He created it, yeah.
Yeah. He draws on it. He lives on it. That's like food for him. Kind of like a vampire that sucks blood. For him, he sucks spirit, the soul, right out of people, and then ends up using it to control them. my next book, I'm going to write about that.
It's a whole subject. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole psychological issue that really deserves a lot of attention, and I give it a lot of attention in my book. I don't know if you've read the chapter yet called Chairman of the Board RTC.
I don't remember now. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's later. It's like chapter 35 or so.
I may have read it.
But, okay, I cover, my interpretation of who he is as a man, as an individual. And, his treatment of his own father, Ron Miscavige, was a horribly sad example of domination by nullification. Just diminishing his father's presence, diminishing his own father's role as a father, and treating him as just a peon, as a minion, and putting him down in front of other people. See, that was David Miscavige's stock in trade. Unfortunately, my husband Peter Schless fell into that with him. Very typical of David Miscavige, who, by the way, is not a skilled musician. And my husband at the time, Peter Schless, was an award-winning musician and composer. But within Goldale Productions, David Miscavige was constantly criticizing Peter's music and putting him down. And I'm like, okay, what is David Miscavige's qualifications for judging Peter's or any of the other musicians' music? None. He had no musical ability, but because he makes himself the most important one at the base, the only one who can get anything done, he judges everybody else's work. And then, he ended up destroying Peter. He has sucked all the life out of Peter Schless. And I just want to bring up, without dwelling on this point too much, did you happen to see Tony Ortega's article about the woman, the Aftermath fan, Erin Hodges Plum,
Yep.
went to the in-face with a copy of my book? Did you see that story?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Very pathetic. I mean, in one way it was really just outrageously exciting that Erin accomplished that, infiltrating the in-base with a copy of my book. But the fact that my husband, Peter Schless, happened to be playing there, and she walked up to him and gave him a copy of this book, she took a photo of him. And
Looking away, yeah.
Picture, I had to enlarge it to look closely at it to identify that was really him. Because he looked so ashen, and his face was chalky, and he was so thin. I almost cried when I saw the picture, and yet he's the very man who just, he videoed an attack piece on me after I appeared on Leah Remini's show, episode 6, and Peter said some of the most vile things that I've ever heard anybody say about any of the contributors. So here was my husband, my ex-husband, saying this about me, but even though he said all those horrible things about me, when I saw the photo that Erin gave us, and I saw how ashen and chalky and thin Peter was, all I could feel was compassion for him.
Yeah.
Of like, how did this man, who was an award-winning musician-composer, how did he sink to such a pathetic, low place in his life? And the answer to that question is, he chose to stay at the in-base, and David Miscavige destroyed him.
No, they refer to these videos as POW-style videos to get your ex-friends and your ex-family and married partners to say things about you, your children, your parents, whoever, to say things negative about you, to discredit you. And what I find interesting, first of all, just sort of off to the side of this, they never say anything of substance. It's all just you were nobody, you were nothing, which is really kind of an interesting way to talk about another human being from a church perspective.
Right.
You were nothing, yeah, really. But these POW style videos, I find a lot of people claim, they think these family members and these friends are told to say this and they didn't want to. I imagine to some degree, and maybe in Peter's case, there's a degree of feeling betrayed because while he chose Scientology over his career and over his wife, over you, he might feel you chose not Scientology over him.
Right.
And that's like a bigger deal to him.
Absolutely. It's huge to him. And he wrote it in a letter. He told, after we split up, I didn't hear from him other than the phone calls the first couple days after I left. I didn't hear from him for almost a year. And in his letter, one of his letters, he uses the word abandon. He said that I abandoned him. And he also quoted that word in a letter or a story or something that the Tampa Bay Times did on spouses who split up when one spouse left and the other one stayed in. And he used the term that I abandoned him. So very clearly that is how he felt. And I don't know if he still feels that way, but that is what happened. And so for him, the fact that I left Scientology, of course, was a suppressive act. And then that he felt that I abandoned him. So in his eyes, I committed two unforgivable acts. And so for that, he disconnected from me. And that was, I experienced Scientology's very cruel disconnection policy.
Yeah.
For that reason. And for me, was the opposite. I was, capturing my life, trying to salvage the life that I still had, and trying to actually regain my freedom. So for me, it was the exact opposite, because I saw Scientology as a fraud and as a trap. He saw Scientology as a religion and, the only answer to mankind's problems. So, Peter and I had gotten to opposite ends of the spectrum regarding our beliefs.
Yeah, when people read the book, they're going to see that basically you felt abandoned long before that, while you were still there. If that's an appropriate.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. That is definitely. I was hoping that was a very evident message in the book, because, well, I would like to know why you're saying that, because that means a lot to me.
Well, you described 3 escape attempts that you would have absolutely successfully on the first 2 would have successfully gotten away and never had to go back. And you went back, you were convinced to go back because of a marriage that was important to you. And the first thing he did was say see you as you got hauled away to the RPF.
Yeah.
That was a little bit jarring to see, and that's something that apparently happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You need to be punished, and he knew you needed to be punished. That was his mindset.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I've been out for 19 years, and even as you say that, I feel kind of a bit of a stab in my heart. It's I hadn't thought about that in a while, and yeah, you're absolutely right, and it hurts. And I think that people who are trapped in the Sea Org they live within a state of denial to some extent. Where you're denying that what you're doing is wrong. You're trying to convince yourself constantly that it's the right thing to do. But I was in denial that Peter had abandoned our marriage, really, for the Sea Org, because he became more loyal to the Sea Org than he was to our marriage at that point. So
yeah, it's a conversation I hear over and over again on Leah Remini's show and in the articles I read. It's just the pattern that I keep hearing.
Yeah, well, it's the thought control. It's the mind control. Some people use the word brainwashing, but it's like, my question was always, why is Peter so sold out? Why is he so locked in and I'm not? And I think it had a lot to do with my job, because as a designer, I was constantly going off the base, working with outside vendors, and I was one of the few people at the base who had to go outside to do my job. And for that reason, I stayed connected to the outside world, and I think to that extent, I stayed connected to reality. Whereas Peter, he lived in his own bubble. He lived in a music studio. He recorded music morning, noon, and night. He didn't watch TV or read newspapers. He was just completely, all he ever heard from was David Miscavige. So that's all he knew. And I did not live like that. So I was able to hang on to my sanity through my connection to the outside world, where he was actually cut off.
Absolutely, and he did that to himself to an extent. He didn't want to see, which is we see a lot with the public, the few public left.
I agree. It's a choice. It is a choice, and that's why, when after Erin Hodges Plum infiltrated the in-phase with my book, and then the photos hit the news, a lot of people were expressing compassion and sadness for Peter. And some people wrote to me and asked about that, and I said, you know what? Of course I feel compassionate for him, because he's a prisoner of war. He's a POW. He is trapped, and he's not even aware of being trapped. He thinks he's, achieving spiritual freedom. But he lives behind locked fences. He has somebody in control of his autonomy, his mobility, 24/7. And so he has no freedom at all, but he does not see that. And so you have to ask the question, okay, do we feel compassion for people like that? Or do we say, you know what, that is a choice. It's a choice, and you can escape just like anybody else can escape. I escaped and made it. A lot of people escaped and made it. Mike Rinder escaped. Mark Headley escaped. Claire Headley escaped. Lots of people escaped. So you have to, it gets down to, for me, it's really rough. Because in one breath, I feel compassionate towards Peter because he's so brainwashed. But in another one, I say, you know what? I got out. You can get out too. So it's a choice. And I think that, he's still been there 19 years after I left. That's a choice. And so when you choose that life, you also choose all the repercussions.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the word escape has come up a bunch of times. And anytime someone talks about leaving in-base, the word escape is associated with it. That's a tough pill to swallow, that people are leaving a religion by way of escape. It's it keeps coming back to me, because you hear it all the time, and I think for a lot in the X community, a lot in the critic community, it just becomes so matter of fact to talk about escaping, but it's escaping. It's not leaving, it's escaping. It's crazy.
You know what? You're right, and I'm really glad you're bringing that up, because the word escaping Scientology, it's almost become normalized. And yet, if you really look at that, it's like, why the hell should someone have to escape to get out of a religion?
Right.
And, the point you're bringing up, to me, is really significant. People are not free to just walk out the gate and say, I changed my mind. I'm leaving now. Thank you so much. I wish you a good life. I mean, that's not the kind of conversation that will ever happen. You have to go through their procedures. You have to do it on their terms. You have to, like Jefferson Hawkins actually wrote a book called Counterfeit Dreams, and he wrote the story about how he told them that he wanted to leave. Instead of escaping, he went out on their policy, on their process.
Oh, God.
And he spent months trying to get out. And actually, Gary Jackson Moorhead, same thing. He was months, almost a year, trying to get out on their terms. And that's why I didn't bother to try, because I saw what other people had to go through to get out, and I thought it was torture, psychological and physical torture. And I was not going to subject myself to that. So I left on my terms instead of theirs. And that is the only way to get out. I mean, that's the way to get out. You have to escape.
Wow, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a wear down process. It's like, well, maybe if we make you go through all these steps, you'll just give up. And that happens, I bet.
Absolutely, that's the point. The point is to wear you down so that you do give up. I mean, you know, the first 2 times I left, I escaped. But I came back because security guards came after me and just coerced me into giving it another try. And in both cases, when I came back, I was sequestered out at a building where it was called the Old Greenskeeper's House, and I was there by myself. Couldn't connect with my husband, couldn't connect with anybody else except security guards. And I just did labor around the Old Greenskeeper's House, out in the greenhouse or whatever, and had no sane conversations because there was no one else to talk to. You're completely sequestered, except, like I say, with security guards. And you're put through that, and you're taken in for sessions or security checks, interrogations, and this goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. And you keep asking, when is this going to be done? When is this going to be done? And you never get an answer. And the whole point is, it's endless. It will never end. They just are trying to wear you down because they want you to wear down and give up and just give in and decide to stay. So that's why so many people escape instead of going through that procedure, because it's torture. And I'll bring up, you haven't read this yet in the book, but in one of the later chapters, I talk about after I escaped the 3rd time, how I actually went back to Los Angeles to, quote-unquote, route out the right way, their way. And I did that partly because I had left my car in LA and I had to drive it back anyway. I went back to get it, but my mother came with me, and she served as my insurance to make sure that I would get out.
Right.
But I was told by the OSA people, Office of Special Affairs, that we would be doing this for 3 or 4 days, spec test, and then it would be done. Well, I was there for 4 weeks, and it still wasn't done. It still wasn't done. It still wasn't done. And they just were trying to get me to change my mind, stay in the Sea Org, and they were wearing me down. And my mother was saying, Karen, don't you see that? That they're just trying to wear you down. This is like survival of the fittest. And when I finally realized that, I said, that's it, I'm done. And I'm not going to tell the rest of that because it's covered in my book.
Yeah, read the book, people. She's telling you everything. I'm sorry, I get you to talk about everything.
It's one of the best stories in the book. So,
well,
anyway.
Isn't it ranked like top 6 on Amazon or something?
In the cult, yeah. You know, Amazon has categories, and in the category of religious cults, and there's tons of books in there. As of 2 days ago, it was number 6. Today, it's number 4.
Yes. All right. Good deal.
So we've got to keep it going.
So I know we're running short on time here. I have 10 questions. You know what 10 questions are, I believe?
Yeah.
Okay, I have that for you. Before we do that, there was something that we really wanted to focus on, and now in short time, I got to bring it up now, and that was cover-ups within Scientology. You talked earlier about the Lisa McPherson case. Now, I don't think you knew exactly what was going on, but you knew something was wrong. Am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, I was told something was wrong the day I arrived at Flag, when one of the executives in CMO Clearwater, which is Commodore's Messenger Org, told me, she said, listen, I can't help you right now. Some chick just died in the Fort Harrison, and we're trying to get the information about her and who is the auditor and the case supervisor. And she said, this is such devastation, but when this is over with, I'll be glad to help you get settled in. And I said, somebody died in the Fort Harrison? What are you talking about? She said, I don't have time to talk about it, but it's just devastation.
Real quick. You don't have to say it. Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead.
I was going to ask you what DevT was.
DevT is short for Developed Traffic. It's DEV-T. And it's a slang term that is like, this is a hassle, or it's like
Gotcha.
special traffic that's developing around a hassle. So that's how she referred to Lisa McPherson's death. This is death tea. It's just a hassle. And that's when I first heard of it. And then, none of it unfolded until after I got out of New York. Nobody in RTC would talk to me about it. It was all covered up. But that is what really opened my eyes to Scientology's. I think the thing that Scientology is most expert at is cover-up, using public relations to cover up situations. And in my chapter in my book called Cover-Up, I expose, none of these things are completely new to people who have been, in Scientology as an base, but there's so many new people who are watching Scientology who don't know anything about this. But in that chapter, I name so many different things that Scientology covered up with public relations. And I will say that I apologize for my own contributions to anything that I helped to cover up, because much of it was unwittingly. In a lot of cases, I didn't even realize the depth of what we were doing. But, for example, the reason I was at the Flag Land Base when I was because Shelley Miscavige had me come down there to completely make over the image of the Flag Land Base staff, to get them out of the military uniforms, because it was an object of dissension that separated Clearwater locals from Scientology. Scientologists look like weirdos dressed in military outfits. And so my job was to dress them in like upscale business clothes that were suitable for the tropical climate of Clearwater. But the point being, I was brought down there like all of a sudden, and I didn't know why it was all of a sudden a rush to make over the flag staff. Well, that was part of the cover-up, because Lisa McPherson had just died, and so Scientology was working very hard on its public relations, and I was part of that whole thing, was to make Scientology look good in Clearwater, just to remove one of the many objections that people in Clearwater had towards Scientology. So there's many other stories like that in my book, but once I realized how I was part of that, I was so pissed that I was a dupe in that experience. And that's just one of many that I write about.
Yeah, it sounds to me like they only keep like a short amount of people, like maybe 4 or 5 people in the know of exactly what happened, and then they had people unwittingly carry out orders, and then they end up, you got that deniability factor. I've seen that with.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, Len Zimberg talks about that when he was a volunteer for the Guardian's office before it was taking Paula Cooper's diary pages to her father. He had no idea what he was delivering. He had no idea why, but he was told that this needed to be done to this person. So yeah, you don't know what you're doing.
That is a great point. I mean, we're given orders to carry out, kind of like being in the military, and you're giving an order to carry out, and you don't question who is giving you the order. You're assuming that this is part of a closely calculated strategy in the military. In Scientology, you're given an order, and you could be a dupe, a pawn in some sort of strategy that, where you're covering up a crime and you don't even know what you're doing it for. So you're used. You're just a pawn in the game, like Len Zimberg said.
Yeah. All right, there's a lot of great information. Look, it's a 41-chapter book. She didn't give you everything today, guys, but definitely read Karen's book. It's really worth reading. It is one of the best books out today, I think. I'm going to go ahead and move on to 10 questions with Karen Pressley. So question number 1, 3 things overheard in the RPF.
three things overheard in the RPS?
Yeah.
That's so funny. Wow. That Stephanie Silcock who was a celebrity auditor, was on the RPS, which is the worst. Gosh. Oh, I'm drawing a blank. Go to the next one.
Yeah, I'm not trying to start gossip either, man. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to be clever and funny, Karen. Thanks for letting me. No, I'm kidding. That's fine. Number 2, true or false? David Miscavige can at least reach the bottom shelf.
Well, only true if it's as I see.
As I was saying earlier, the whole control through negation thing, it's also called Napoleon complex. But moving along, number 3, would you rather serve in the RPF or would you rather read Kirstie Alley's Twitter feed?
I'll take the RPF any day.
Wow. Just saying something. Number 4, complete the sentence. The truth will.
Say it again. I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Complete this sentence. The truth will.
The truth will guide you out of Scientology.
I hope so. Somebody listening tells somebody who needs to listen. Number 5, what's your favorite animation ever? You have any favorite animations from your childhood, from any time, from now, anywhere?
Oh, my favorite animation? Pinocchio.
Pinocchio, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I loved watching his nose grow when he
Wouldn't it solve all life's problems if people's nose just grew and they told lies?
Well, it's so funny because I've actually thought about Miscavige, Pinocchio. Like, this guy would have a nose that would never make it through the door.
All right, I think number 6 is an easy one. True or false? It's never too late to find happiness.
Very true.
Very true. Number 7, pudding or Jello?
Pudding, chocolate.
Gosh, I don't have pudding that much anymore. I need some. Number 8. I heard this question brought up a lot, and since you worked at Celebrity Center and were around some of those guys, who do you have the most hope for? Which celebrity is the next Leah Remini?
Ooh, I'm hoping somebody like Ann Archer, who is an intelligent woman.
I have a hard time seeing that after the way she talked to John Sweeney, but a lot of people talked that way to John Sweeney, didn't they? Mike Ritter talked that way to John Sweeney, so.
But her son, Tommy Davis, is out also. Well, he's out of Sea Org.
Right.
I don't know if he's out of Scientology. But
how much is he rocking the boat?
Yeah, I wish for Ann Archer. She's an intelligent woman. I'm gonna think about that.
Did you know her?
There's going to be other writers like Mark Isham, the musician David Campbell.
Okay.
I'm hoping for them.
Okay. Is it easier from your eyes from what you saw? And I know we're running out of time. Is it easier for you to, in your eyes, for celebrities at a higher level to turn a blind eye? Is just easier?
Absolutely, because very important point, and I write about this in my book. Celebrities turn a blind eye because they are so supported by Scientology.
Right.
That the perks outweigh the integrity. The perks outweigh the need for integrity. And that is what draws the line in the sand between Paul Haggis and Leah Remini and the others, is they both have such personal integrity.
Yeah. I become infuriated when I see John Travolta say, well, why would I look at something so decidedly negative? It was good for me. They're good to me. Well, right. I'm glad you're taking care of Mr. Travolta. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Number 9, Halloween's coming up. What's the best Halloween costume you ever seen? Anything creative you've seen, or you probably designed some?
No, I never did. Oh God, Halloween! Wow. I was a box once.
So simple,
no,
right?
I'll rephrase that. I was a laundry bag once, and I won the best costume. I was
as a laundry bag
with with a drawstring on top, and nobody knew who I was, and I didn't say anything. So I was walking around, and I won best costume for being a laundry bag.
I think because you owned it. You were probably the most believable laundry bag out there.
I guess so.
Finally, number 10. What is your favorite podcast that I host?
Well, the favorite podcast that you host is your podcast.
Good job. Good deal.
No, I love your podcast. I listen to most of yours. Other than ours, my favorite has been the one with Leah Remini.
I see that. I see that, and I appreciate that. I really do. Do you have a website, Karen?
I do. It's www.escapingscientology.com. It covers my book. It covers all the extra book materials that I talk about in my book. I have all this other additional material. It has a photo gallery. It has a blog. And it has links to media if anyone's interested in seeing any videos and reading stories and things that I've exposed about Scientology.
And Jeffrey Hawkins was hugely involved in helping out with that in your book and all that, wasn't he? With the design?
Jefferson Hawkins designed my book cover, and his work has gotten so many compliments for his beautiful design.
That's good.
And he also designed the entire website. So I want to mention that, this is kind of a secret, but Jeff Hawkins and I are going to be collaborating on a project in the very near future. And it's going to be good. And we're going to talk about it one of these days soon.
Okay, I'll link that your website onto the podcast. And is there anything else you want to talk about before we go?
We covered so much good stuff, Chris. I would love to talk with you again. And
absolutely.
I just want to thank you for being there and doing your great work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for being on the show. It really means a lot.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, so there it is, Karen Pressley. Next week you're going to find, I'm going to put out the entire hour and change of Clara Headley. You don't want to miss it. It's amazing. Again, she talked about some things you may never heard before, and she is one of the strongest speakers on the subjects. Until then, please do stay connected, and that about sums it up.
You have been listening to Come Get Some Extra on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, YouTube, and many other streaming services where available. As always, stay connected, and that about sums it up.